really high note with the book of Ecclesiastes and Job. So games will promise to lift us back up. The book of Ecclesiastes is maybe the most bizarre book in the entire Bible. Okay, Robert Alter is a professor of Hebrew, an author, a translator, has translated the wisdom books, and he characterizes the book this way, and I think it's helpful. He says, in a few passages, the teacher offers entirely pragmatic counsel of the sort one might expect to find in Proverbs. For the most part, however, the teacher's observations are properly philosophic, inviting us to contemplate the cyclical nature of reality and of human experience, the fleeting duration of all that we cherish, the brevity of life, and the inexorability or the inevitability of death, which levels all things. The central enigma of the book of Ecclesiastes is how this text of radical dissent, in which time, history, politics, and human nature are seen in such a bleak light, came to be part of the canon. Ecclesiastes is a book about living in a sin-marred world, okay? It's like a groaning, a lament about what it's like to live in exile outside of the garden and a perfect relationship with our Creator. I think Paul talked about Psalms of disorientation to God. The entire book of Ecclesiastes it's a book of disorientation, okay? I think that's part of how we understand it. If you've read Ecclesiastes, it won't take you long to figure out that this isn't a book that proceeds with like a topic sentence and these neat arguments that you can outline, I think the way we're used to in our Western culture, to reading literature and that sort of thing. I think the best way to read this book is to read it as a whole, read it in one sitting, and try to pull out themes, okay? So what I want to do here to try to get into the guts of Ecclesiastes is to simply give you three major themes of the book and how those themes confront major cultural messages that we hear and are inclined to believe. Forewarning, they are bleak, okay? They're raw, but I think they're true. There's also I'm not going to give you, with the exception of the tail end, there's not going to be an uplifting counterbalance here because that's not in the book, okay? And I want to be true to the book of Ecclesiastes because that's what we're doing with this talk. So theme 1. The book of Ecclesiastes confronts the message that you can fit your life into a neat, simple, understandable, happy, clappy box, okay? And what I mean by that is in this world, and I think particularly as Bible-believing Christians, we have this idea that we can see life with 20/20 focus. We've got this fine, detailed little blueprint that tells us who we are, what God's doing, and how our lives fit into the blueprint, right? And the teacher in the book of Ecclesiastes says, I've lived a long life, and I'm coming back and I'm writing, I want you to hear some things after my long life. And he says, that bit about a blueprint, it is malarkey. It's hogwash, okay? The most repeated word or theme in the entire book of Ecclesiastes is the Hebrew word hevel. So the very first verse starts us off with hevel, hevel, says the teacher, utterly hevel. Everything is hevel. The NIV translates this as meaningless. Meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. But every commentator I read said this word meaningless doesn't really get the full meaning of the author of Ecclesiastes when he uses the word hevel, okay? The literal translation of the word hevel is breath or vapor or smoke. So Robert Alter, we heard from earlier, translates this opening line of the book. Merest breath, says the teacher. Merest breath. All is mere breath. And he helps us understand what this means by saying, he describes the meaning of this Hebrew word. And he says the Hebrew hevel probably indicates the flimsy vapor that is exhaled in breathing, invisible except on a cold winter day, and in any case, immediately dissipating in the air. And this is the key part, I think. Because the use of the word hevel is really, it's a kind of metaphor, okay? So if then one wanted to line up the abstractions implied by hevel, it would include not only futility, absurdity, and vanity, but at least insubstantiality, ephemerality, it's like transitoriness, and elusiveness as well. So that the image of hevel is life is like smoke. It's like a vapor. You can see it, you can grab onto it, but you can't grab onto it. It's fading. It's there, but it's fading. And life is like that. Life is elusive. There's mystery. It's an enigma. Everything is hevel, okay? So it really comes against this idea that as God-following people, we have this detailed blueprint that we can all understand perfectly. He said again and again, hevel, hevel, hevel. Everything is hevel. The second theme I want to hit at is this. Ecclesiastes confronts the message that you will find real meaning and lasting value in wealth, in work, in pleasure, and even in wisdom, okay? I don't think I need to do much to sell y'all on the idea that we get bombarded with this message daily. Get a great job, get a better job, get a more fulfilling job, get shiny new stuff, have more sex, have better sex, eat better food, eat the right organic, super healthy food, drink trendy microbrews, drink craft cocktails, get a new house, get a bigger house, have kids, find a great spouse, go on a great vacation, earn more influence, get smarter, be wiser, read the right books, listen to the right podcasts, get enlightened. Then you'll find real meaning and happiness and value. And the teacher in Ecclesiastes says, I have lived a long life. I have had it all. My project, my experiment was to pursue meaning in every nook and cranny of this world. And now I want to, and the author in Ecclesiastes, at a minimum, whether it's written by Solomon or not, at a minimum, wants us to think of Solomon, wants us to think of everything Solomon had, kingdom, building projects. When you talk about sex, there are verses in Ecclesiastes that are chilling. I had unrestrained pleasure. Okay, so the teacher is saying, I have had it all. I've lived my whole life, and now I want you to hear something about those things. Okay, and what does he want to say? And for each of these, I could give you 4 or 5 verses to this effect. So wealth. What about wealth? Whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless, hevel. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. What about work? Surely work's good. For a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This too is meaningless, hevel, and a great misfortune. What does a man get for all the toil and anxious striving with which he labors under the sun? All his days, his work is pain and grief. Even at night, his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless, hevel. What about pleasure? And this first verse, I think, is chilling if you really think about it. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure, no restraint, right? Yet when I surveyed all my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, hevel, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. What about wisdom? Andy Karski is going to come tomorrow and talk to us about the Proverbs and living a wise life and making wise choices. What does the teacher say about wisdom? The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself. This too is meaningless. Hevel. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. Okay? Not exactly uplifting, right? As I think about this theme, I have this, I've been thinking about the time machine as my little analogy here. And we'd all love to have a time machine, right? We'd all love to go 30 years out in the future, 40 years out in the future, see our future lives, see how the postures of our heart now and over time, our investment of money, our investment of skills, what have those things wrought? And you come back and tell us now, right? We'd like to know that. And I feel like the teacher in Ecclesiastes is saying, I've gone out there. Like, I've gone 30, 40 years ahead into your life, and I can tell you what all the things you're chasing after. I can tell you about the return on your investments, okay? And it's hevel, it's hevel, it's hevel. There's not ultimate value in those things, okay? So don't be fooled by the mirage. Theme 3. Ecclesiastes confronts the idea that we are in control, and if we just do the wise things in life, everything will turn out good and fair. This one's a little bit more subtle, but I think we all have this implicit belief that if we just make wise and smart choices, well, nothing bad ever happens to us, right? In other words, life is sort of like a math function. You input the right decisions, and you get predictable outcomes, right? You get a known outcome. We hear this all of the time. Raise your kids in the church, pray with them, read the Bible with them, and your kids won't go wayward, right? Save, 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 budget, 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 make the right financial decisions, and you will be financially set. Eat healthy, eat the right foods, exercise, make good decisions. You don't get cancer, you won't get sick. You'll live a long, long life, right? And we could go on. Get the right job, go to the right school, then get the right internship, then get the right job, then get the right promotion, and you will have a lasting, awesome, perfect work life, right? I think we hear all of these messages, and beneath it all is this idea that we're in control of outcomes and circumstances in our life. And I think the teacher in Ecclesiastes says, I've lived a full life, and let me tell you what I've seen. He's constantly saying, let me tell you another thing. Here's another thing I've seen. Here's some verses to this effect. He says, in this meaningless hevel life of mine, I've seen both of these things. A righteous man perishing in his righteousness, and a wicked man living long in his wickedness. I've seen something else under the sun. The race, it's not to the swift, and the battle's not to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. There's something else meaningless, hevel, that occurs on this earth. Righteous men get what the wicked deserve, and wicked men get what the righteous deserve. This too, I say, is meaningless, hevel. I like the way the Bible Project guys describe this idea, and the phrase they use is, the teacher is saying, there's a glitch in the system. Like, there's a glitch, something is screwed up. The swift don't always win the race. Kids starve. Kids get cancer. Innocent people go to jail. Racism persists. 1 in 6 women get sexually assaulted in this country in a lifetime. There's a glitch, something is totally screwed up, okay? I think what he's saying is, like all those proverbs Andy Karski's going to talk about tomorrow, do the right thing and your life will turn out right. There's an exception to that. There's no guarantee. It's hevel, it's hevel, it's hevel. And I think the message for us in this one is, let's not be deluded into thinking we have true absolute control over outcomes. Our working assumptions that we can control the outcomes in our life and that those circumstances are predictable, is a mirage. Okay? If you're anything like me, you get to this point in the book and you say, what do I do with this book? Like, what a bizarre, this is in the Bible? Like, really? If everything is Hevel, a fog without a blueprint, if the various pursuits of work and pleasure and wisdom aren't going to give us real meaning, if there's a glitch and there's injustice and inequity in our world, like, what then? What then? We ought to be asking that question, right? And we ought to feel the tension between what this is saying and the rest of Scripture. Before I get to to the extent there are conclusions in this book, which I'm going to get to real quick, I just pause and say, I've come to really appreciate that the simple fact this book is in the Bible at all, okay? Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick, who is a super dark guy, like really dark guy, said, Ecclesiastes is the truest of all books. It's the truest of all books because his experience told him there was more sorrow in life than joy. And I think there is something raw and real about the book of Ecclesiastes. And it makes me feel like we have a God who wants to hear our frustrations and is big enough to hear the things that the teacher in Ecclesiastes is saying. There are two conclusions. I almost hesitate to use the word conclusion because it almost implies more cohesiveness than I think there is in this book. The first may surprise you a little bit, but it's repeated throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. And in the words of Dave Matthews, it is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we will die. Okay, you know the song, The Tripping Billies? I'm probably dating myself, but... and I could put up six different verses in the book, but here's just a couple. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because nothing is better for a man under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad, be merry. Go eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for it is now that God favors what you do. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless Hevel life that God has given you under the sun, all of your meaningless Hevel days. For this is your lot in life and in your toilsome labor under the sun. It sounds sort of pagan, right? But I think the point is we can't change the Hevel in this life. We can't change the Hevel. We can't get rid of the fog. There is going to be inequity and unfairness. The glitch is not going away in this life. So enjoy a good meal. Enjoy a conversation with a friend. Enjoy the sun on your face. Enjoy a good book. And I think what he's saying, he doesn't say this expressly, is enjoy God's creation. Be present. My big conviction, having a newborn, as I've prepared and am saying this out loud, is Brian, put your damn phone down and hold your newborn baby. Like, seriously, be present. Okay, so I think that's part of what the teacher is driving at with this idea. The last conclusion at the very end of the book, it says this: here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. And I think the key is in this last sentence. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing. And that word judgment there is not like a negative judgment, like let's judge the bad guys for their wrong. It is that, but the concept is justice. It's the big sense of justice. One day, God will bring every deed into judgment. He will make everything right. The fog will be gone. One day, God will clear the Hevel. One day, God will get rid of the glitch. One day, you will find a lasting meaning with God. And so I think the question for us in the book of Ecclesiastes is, will we, in this Hevel-filled life, fear God honor God, love God, and keep his commandments. Follow him. Will we fear God and follow him? Because he is a God who one day will clear away all the heaven. Thanks.